Hi everyone, welcome to We Belong Education podcast. Today I'm here with Helen. Helen, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? I'm a little bit excited for today.
Well, yes, you messaged me in the morning. That's how I woke up to that message. And today our guest, actually, you know what, Helen? How about you introduce the guest? I would like you to do that, please.
So today I'm super excited. We have Kylie Captain joining us. Kylie, why don't you, I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited to yarn. I'm dialing in from beautiful Dharawal country today. So before I introduce myself, I just want to acknowledge the land that I'm dialing in from today. I'm a very respectful visitor on this country. I just want to acknowledge the ongoing custodians of this land, the land that you're both on today. I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman, so my mob is from Walgett, a small country town in northwest New South Wales, and I was born and raised on Gadigal country in the inner city suburbs of Redfern and Waterloo. So to everyone listening, I acknowledge the lands that you're on, and just invite you all to express gratitude as well, and maybe say a little thank you in your mind, to the ongoing custodians of country. And we're very spiritual people as well, so it does really mean a lot when you show that gratitude from your heart. So a little bit about me. I like to yarn a lot, but I'll try and keep my summaries
All
short
good.
and sweet. But firstly, Helen, I'm super excited to yarn with you as well. I just want to say, that Helen and I go way back, and it's really, really nice. It's been a long time between yarns. My son Tyrell actually turns 25 this July, and Helen was his carer. She was looking after the ush that my kids went to. And Tyrell he was young. He was on like in year 2, year 3 back then, and my daughter had
Wow.
just started in at kindergarten. And as a parent, when you're working full time, you need trusting people that you just know that your babies are safe with. And Helen, you were that person for us.
Oh, thank you.
And it was
Helen
so,
is like that for many. Hey, Helen. I mean,
yeah.
not just for the children, also, like even for educators, including myself, someone we can bank on, trust. Yeah.
Oh, you're
Absolutely.
making me go a bit red.
So I just want to acknowledge that as well. And it's always nice to kind of, we all do so much as educators and carers, and it's nice to soak that up as well. And it's New South Wales Women's Week as well when we're recording this. So I just want to acknowledge you as the really strong, deadly woman that you are. And thank you for for the work that you did for us, and for all the children that you have showed up for over the years. It's great to see you
Thank
still
you.
working in this space. Getting back to the question, though, introducing myself. So I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman. I'm a teacher. I'm an author. So I've written 3 best-selling books now. I'm the president of the Aboriginal Studies Association. I am, a really proud Aboriginal woman. I'm a mum of 2 children who are nearly 25 and 21, an auntie. I've done a lot around breaking cycles, really trying to share the message and hopes
Mm,
for Australia around reconciliation,
Mm.
around truth telling, around ensuring that Aboriginal education is authentically embedded in our curriculums. I'm on a mission to really inspire the hearts and minds of educators to never allow another cohort of students to go through our education systems and our Australian systems. We strive to be, one of the best in the world. So, I really think it's through maybe learning, relearning, unlearning. So there's a
mm,
lot of things that I'm passionate about, but that always wasn't my story. I'm also, I'm a survivor of many of life's challenges. I've broken through some really tough times in my own life. In
mm,
my book, I write about things like grief. There's a chapter that I write called Black and Proud. So I talk about my Aboriginality.
mm,
I talk about the teacher in all of us. I write about
mm,
the leader in all of us. So, yeah, I've just been through some really tough times. I was a student that was really disengaged, that never felt good enough or smart enough, but I live a life of freedom and choice thanks to the
mm,
power of education, and really thanks to my own strength and determination as a proud, resilient woman, but also with the help and guidance of some incredible educators as well who really
mm.
made a difference, which I think we'll probably yarn a little bit more about. But that's me in a brief
Mm-hmm.
summary.
So let's jump in today. We've got, as Kylie said, she's actually an author. I have one of her books here, which is Dream Big and Imagine the What If. And just, I've got to say, Kylie, I'm so proud of you because when I first met you, you hadn't even begun teaching. There's a chapter in this book about grief, and I just met your son just after your family had unfortunately had that tragic loss. So, caring for him through that time always sticks close to my heart. But yeah, I watched you go from like, you become friends with someone, and then I've watched you, even though we aren't that connected, I've watched you go from strength to strength. So, author, how many books is it now?
So 3 books.
Three
I
books.
always had a goal of becoming an author. And that was kind of even like we're talking, and there was that tragic thing that happened, So for those that haven't read my book or aware little bits of my story, I have experienced a lot of grief. And even
Mm,
to get to that point in my life, Helen, that was after a lot of setbacks,
mm,
That was after losing my mum as a little girl, from lots of hospital stays, from overcoming significant addiction throughout my teenage years and going down a really negative path. It was after being diagnosed with a life-threatening heart condition that also claimed my mum's life when I was 3
mm,
years old, and I had to have an internal cardiac defibrillator put in when my daughter was 1 year old. So I'd already
mm,
been through some really, really tough
Mm.
times. And then tragically, the father of my children passed away when they were
mm.
just 7 and 3. So that's when I became a single mum, and that's when you would have first met Tyrell.
I did. Mm,
And I guess I always, even before all of that, I always wanted to be an author.
mm,
I always thought, well, what if I was brave enough to share my story, and what if I did make a difference by sharing that? And so in my book, I thought if I only ever write one book, there's going to be a chapter on all the things that I'm passionate about. So as you mentioned, grief, Aboriginal history, I write about the power of positivity. Like it
mm,
turns into like a motivational book,
Mm.
the power of our minds and resilience and all these types of things. And then I went on, like for me, I became a teacher. A teacher did change my life. She really saw me when I walked through those school gates and told me that I was good enough and I was smart enough and I could do
mm,
anything that I set my mind to. And there was a really a it was like I'll maybe share a little bit of a yarn, but that changed my life. And I wrote a book. So my second book is called Be That Teacher Who Makes a Difference and Lead
mm,
Aboriginal Education for All Students. It's now compulsory and mandatory for some subjects at the University of Sydney. It's making a difference for educators around the nation and abroad. My
mm,
third book, though, and he's actually I just saw him walk past. He's actually popped in to visit because he's recently moved out. So the man that I'm talking about is arriving. Um,
mhm,
my son. So I actually co-wrote that third book
mm,
with my son Tyrell, who's an amazing, inspirational young man. He was,
mm,
he's just a wise old soul. So he's been
mm,
working in a lot of our schools, with kids with trauma and grief themselves. So
mm,
we wrote a motivational book for teens, and that one's called Create the Life of Your Dreams in Your Teens.
mm,
Thought really carefully. I am a dreamer. I've broken a lot of cycles, getting a university degree, went on a leadership journey. I'm running a successful company now, working
mhm,
with students in remote communities, teachers, speaking at a lot of events, conferences. And I thought, where could I have this book launch? It's going to be really special because I co-wrote it with my son. And, there's, like that's really, really special. And I dreamt it up, and we had our launch at the Sydney Opera House in March last year.
mhm.
It was around the time that all the Taylor Swift tickets were selling out, and everyone, they were all snapping them up. They were gone. Literally, there were 200 tickets for the Opera House launch, and they all went within 2 days. And I had kids coming
Wow.
everywhere to the Opera House and
Mm,
people going, I need a ticket to be there. And I'm like, so they were calling me the Taylor Swift of like authoring. People were trying to get into this thing, and I run a lot of workshops. So all the things
mm,
about I run workshops and that. So I work with Aboriginal women in rehabilitation centres. I work with students based on the themes of that book. I work with teachers around pedagogy, curriculum, resources. And I've got some like membership communities and things happening as well. So that's a
Hmm.
mm.
really long answer to that question. I told you, I
Uh,
did warn you, I like to yarn too much.
actually, I want to go back to your second book, and maybe I might have missed the sequence here, but
Yeah,
on the second book, from what I remember, you co-wrote the second book with that teacher. Yes?
I did.
Hmm.
I did. So Dr. Kathy Burgess. So like we've been connected. So since I was at 15-year-old, you know, I walked through those school gates and, you know, sadly, and it's not something that I'm proud of, but I own my story. And, you know, even after working in education for a long, long time, I I was working with like chronic non-attenders and working in like, you know, early intervention. And I could hear people talk about some of the families that they were dealing with, you know, and I was brave enough one day, because I didn't have any high hopes or high expectations, you know, I was brave enough one day to use my voice to say, you know what, that was me. I was that chronic non-attender and a teacher
Mhm.
really believed in me. And
Mm,
the yarn that I always express gratitude for is that as a year 10 student, a lot of my teenage years, I was heavy in addiction. Like, and I don't even say that it was really, really bad.
mm,
I was heading down. I probably would have ended up dead or in jail. I was getting involved in petty crime. And I grew up in a community where I was just surrounded by drugs and alcohol, and I didn't see any like a lot of success. And um, but I walked through the school gates in year 10 and I was hanging on for dear life to try to get to the end of year 10 because I had one older sister, Narelle, who sadly passed away when she was just 30 as well. But I thought if Narelle could get to the end of year 10, then what if I could as well? So I was going
mm,
to school just to stay on the books. I was walking in 2 to 3 days a week, often late, 11 o'clock, sometimes under the influence, just trying to be there. And this day it was different, you know, and I bumped into Kathy in the corridors and she hadn't
mm,
even taught me yet. And she said, Kylie, and you can see the book in the background, actually, it's the pink book.
mm-hmm.
Got them all on display for my show
Yeah.
and tell.
Very proud.
She said, Kylie, I can't wait to see my ab studies class next year. You're going to be great. You're smart. You're deadly. And I'm thinking, with all respect, who's this white woman? And she doesn't even know me. And, you know, she doesn't
Mm,
know my story. And a little bit of context about education for my family as well. Like my mum grew up on the banks of the Namar River. She lived in a little tin shack in an Aboriginal community. Back then, living under the Act, she actually wasn't allowed to go to school from the age of 11. She was told that she
mm,
could work on cattle stations for white families, and she didn't like them. She'd say horrible, horrible things, you know. So for
Mhm.
me, that's kind of how I sort of grew up as well. Anyway, Kathy said, you know, I can't wait to see. She was trying to get people, and she was rolling out one of our first Aboriginal studies courses at my school, Cleveland Street High School in Alexandria, and she said, Kylie, you're smart, you're deadly. I can't wait to see you in my ab studies class. And she, you know, there's that beautiful quote, you know, you'll always remember how they made you feel. And
mm,
Mhm.
she made me feel something. And I thought, oh, this is a bit weird and different because no one's ever called me smart. No one's ever referred to me in that kind of with those high expectations. And I thought to myself, what if she was right? And around that same time, they were getting all of us kids into work experience, and some went to hairdressers, to local councils, to mechanic shops. And for me, I believe that they thought really carefully about where they sent me. They sent me to the Department of Aboriginal Affairs. I was
mm,
a really poor kid. I lived in housing commission, you know, it was a lot of poverty. Sometimes, you know, we really struggled financially. So, you know, so I didn't have clothes or anything to get there. My school gave me a $50 voucher, which allowed me to go to Marrickville Metro. I bought some deadly clothes and
mm-hmm,
got dressed up for the very, very first time. And my mum, my second mum who raised me, sadly, you know, my birth mum passed when I was 3, but my mum's sister raised me as her own. And, you know, I always express a lot of gratitude to both my mums and my nan who raised me. But my mum, Denise, burst into tears telling me how much I look like my mum, Millie. And naturally, I wanted to make mum, Denise, proud. So
mm,
also gave me a Metro 10 pass for all the
Mhm.
people that understand the Sydney bus systems back
Mhm.
growing up, you know, the Metro 10 passes. And that took away the financial barrier for me to get there. So I could go get
mm,
myself some clothes. I got myself the bus voucher and having panic attacks all the way to the city, well, freaking out. I bravely jumped on that bus and I took those steps and I walked into this building in the city and I was a fish out of water with all the morning commuters. And I remember the first thing I said to my mum in the afternoon was, Mum, there's black fellas in the city and they're dressed real flash, you know? And
Mhm.
because Linda Burney was there, Gabriella, all
oh,
these Aboriginal people that I
yeah,
didn't even know existed. So growing
mm,
up, I heard about the athletes, the artists, the footy players, and all those deadly people. That was not me. And
mm,
on day 3, they called my school and said, she's amazing. She's running our switchboard. Our receptionist is sick. She's doing all the family history stuff. Could we keep her for another week? So what I think my school said was something along the lines of keep her. And I stayed there for
mm,
2 whole weeks. I still have the letter that they wrote me saying, you know, that I was amazing, Kylie, go back to school, you could work here one day. So I kind of always knew I wanted to do something where I could use my life, my upbringing.
mm,
But for the first time in my schooling, I saw myself, my family, my people, my community reflected in the curriculum.
mm,
where my love for Aboriginal studies started. And ever since, I'm now the president of the Aboriginal Studies Association. I'm a teacher, I'm a leader in Aboriginal education. I've just celebrated my 44th birthday, and this is rewinding back as a 15-year-old, the yarn shed.
Yeah, so I was super excited to get you on today, and this is what you've just said is kind of leading into what I want to talk about, is that you do talk about being the teacher that makes a difference, and our podcast is for early years and USH educators and teachers, and as a white woman myself, I'm really conscious of how can I be the best ally I can possibly be? How can I create really inclusive spaces for, any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children that come into my care? And if anyone's read Dr. Chris Sarah's book, he talks about not coming from a deficit, always being positive, because Aboriginal kids need to hear that, am I allowed to use the word deadly? That Kylie, am I?
Deadly, sister,
Well,
yeah.
that you need to tell those little kids that they're deadly and that they were doing amazing work, instead of just, we know sometimes old school stereotypes, people get pigeonholed, and we don't want that for our Aboriginal kids. So I suppose one of my first questions for you is really, what can we do to support these children coming into our care? Not just support the children, we also talk about, making those relationships with families as well. What tips do you have for anyone listening about how they can create those connections and, give that confidence to those little Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids that, need to know that they're capable of doing great things as well?
And before you answer that question, I also had Helen said, as a white woman, as a brown guy who has migrated from a different country, I would like to say that the awareness about um, I haven't been educated as a part of, as I just said, when I came in here to this new apartment, but also when I came in here as an immigrant, when I migrated to Australia, that's 18 years ago. It wasn't a part of getting a visa. It wasn't a part of getting citizenship. It wasn't a part of getting residency. Yeah. So that has been sense of agency is all there is to become aware. So whilst you answer that question about how Helen could be inclusive, or people like Helen, you can also say how people like Saurabh can be inclusive also.
Well,
when
Kylie, Saurabh told me before you came online that when he was immigrating to Australia, he thought that only white people lived in Australia. He didn't really, like, obviously coming from India, didn't really know much. And
yeah,
so,
because my
to
information was
surprise,
based on
there's more to just white Australia, Saurabh, when you got
because
here.
but I represent that community. I
No, definitely.
This is what is happening. It's a fact. Like what I mean to say by that is my information was based on cricket, and that's all I knew about Australia, cricket. And I'm not saying that I was that I'm sure that Cricket Australia would have done something and they would have shown something on the games, but we were interested in the outcome of the game and not whilst the game is going on, what they would have shown us. And English is a second language or third language. So I wouldn't have even understood, even if Cricket Australia did represent something on the television while the games were going on. So
Absolutely.
that is
No,
what.
and
Mhm.
that's a really, really, really good yarn. And it really leads me into probably my response around, and sometimes it seems really tokenistic, but I think, relationships, and I think for all the educators as well, when you're making a difference and really connecting and creating those culturally safe spaces for our Aboriginal kids, you're educating all of the other kids there as well. And I think always to have that bigger picture, think about the ripple effect, knowing that you are making change for our future generations. And also, what you're potentially doing is also educating those little children's family as well, because they could be, immigrants that have come to Australia and, haven't had the opportunity to learn about the diversity. Like a lot of people look at me and say, well, you don't look Aboriginal. Whereas if I didn't own a mirror, I would think that I was just as black as my beautiful nan that raised me. Like that's Aboriginality. It comes from within. It's a real, it's a feeling. And we don't talk about, like how much blood in the olden days, like they used to talk about, like whether you're half caste, quarter caste, 1/8,
Mhm.
whatever. It's either you're Aboriginal or you're not. And that, it's that you identify, you're accepted, and that that you actually have the heritage as well. So I think, like there are simple things, and I reflect back even to my time as an Aboriginal mum working with you, Helen, at that, we just created relationships. We were mothers and we were human first. So I think a lot of educators often reach out to me and go, well, how do I connect with Aboriginal families? So I have to remind people, go, do you know what? Like, have a yarn, like make connections, and sometimes, and I think we're all about relationality, and we like to establish that connection before we get on to business. So just to have a conversation, build those relationships, even though you're busy. We know how busy everyone is, but taking that time
Mhm.
to yarn, to connect. How was your weekend? The league's starting up again soon. Do you follow the football? How was your holidays? What did you guys get up to? Even without even questioning, but just sharing some of the things that you did. Oh, my family, we went on a holiday to so and so. That I went down to the Yarbin event down at, Victoria Park, whatever it might be, so they can start to suss you out, because we do have a little bit of we're really aware. We've got this real strong intuition as well, and we pick up on people's energy. And I
Mhm.
think just if we can just demonstrate, that yes, you are a human, that you actually care, and that and before we get into all the other things. And I think, there's culturally, we talk about cultural safety and culturally safe, centers, and what does that look like? And sometimes for our mob as well, looking around, because we have to remember that, not that long ago, our people weren't allowed in places like this. We were excluded.
Mm.
So
Mm.
things like if we have our flags up, if we have an acknowledgement of country, sometimes are really important things. You might see some artwork. There could be an affirmation from the USH or the center,
Mm,
that we are, inclusive. Just a little personalized, so to make it meaningful. Yes, we can use certain words and think about our acknowledgements, but like just get the kids to kind of create something. And
mm,
Yeah.
I think those visuals are really important. But then I think also there's an opportunity. So on my website, and there's many out there as well, but there's like, you can download a free significant dates. You're looking at all of our significant dates. So we don't
mm,
have to wait until just NAIDOC or Reconciliation Week to do something.
mm,
So it could be something like having it in your newsletters, whether it's around, Harmony Day, even acknowledging, like the Mabo, or, Mabo Day, or the anniversary of the apology, or sorry
mm,
day. And so little things like that allow our families to see. And the Koori grapevine is really big within our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. If they know it's a deadly centre, that with an amazing educator that really understands it, we'll be telling people about it. For
mm,
example, I would be like, oh no, Helen, she's amazing. She understands our people. Like
mm,
Mm.
I really, she's no, she's good. And honestly, that will make it. Our families will want to engage, and a
mm,
lot of the time as well, we can't expect our families, just really quickly, we can't expect our families to be the knowledge holders, because we have to
mm,
Mm.
remember that education has failed many. When I learned Aboriginal studies and histories and curriculum, when I was studying it as a school student at university, a lot of like my mum and my aunties and communities, they knew that we would treated terribly, but they didn't really have the full understanding of all the ins and outs in the education. And sometimes our families feel a little bit put on the spot when they're expected to be the knowledge holders of everything as
Yeah.
well.
mm,
For
Mhm.
example, oh, it's Marbo Day, like how do you think we can celebrate it? So like just be really careful in our language around what we're asking for our families, because yes,
mm,
we might be very proud of who we are. We grew up with our connections community. Don't always expect our kids or our communities to be the knowledge holders as well. So just because that could be something, being put on the
mm.
to ask and share when you're not ready to.
Yeah, it's a really great tip. Something that I heard a few years back. I think I was doing something with it. I think I was doing something with inclusion, with KU inclusion, and we had a really great speaker. And someone said to her, you tell us to contact the land council and they will help us. And I think this applies to our parents as well that come to our service. But they never respond. And the speaker said, before you actually ask of something, just be present. Turn up to an event 2 or 3 times
Mm.
before you ask, can you come and give this information to our service, or can you help us out with this? Actually, just show your face and show that you're an ally and a supporter
Yeah.
before you start. And I think that's the same with parents. Like, the more connection you make, and Kylie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the more connection you make with your families, then, it kind of gets that safe space where you can say, hey, we're doing this, maybe it's something cultural. Do you think this is okay? But yeah, I think that's really important, that we shouldn't always expect our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families to do the heavy lifting for us, because they've been doing it since day dot.
Yeah,
I
and I
have,
just say, like, that's a really good point, Helen. You're spot on there, because sometimes when the only time that our families hear from services or the Aboriginal services out there as well, it's like it's that same time year after year after year when they want something. So you really hit the nail there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
hmm.
absolutely.
Sarah, you were going to ask something.
Yeah,
Yes.
power of education. That is something that you had said earlier in the piece. And this is going slightly away from what we were discussing, but I wanted to cover that point. Where, and also through your conversation, you mentioned something about how education could sometimes be not inclusive. Not, that's not what the words you chose, but that's sometimes education may leave a few things uneducated or unsaid. But when you were talking about your own story early on, you mentioned something about how, because of power of education and the teachers that you had met, that um, you were able to, and the words you used were resilience, power of mind. These are the things that you have actually covered in your work. So how, other than the educator um, who you co-wrote the book with, Professor, I think, Professor Kathy, that you mentioned, yeah. Um, how, what did you do to yourself, or what worked for yourself, as in,
Mm.
because there are people such as the educators that you, the teachers that you met are in this community, but there are also that they may not be present and this may not just apply to the Aboriginal children, that may apply to every child that is in there in our care. What did you what in hindsight, what worked for you?
To be honest, I think that there are certain things that I live by, and it might sound a little bit wamba, which is my Aboriginal word. It means, like crazy, a little bit, whatever. But there's certain
Mhm.
things, there's practical things that I do as well. But I think I scared myself into going in a totally different direction. Like
Okay.
the way that the place that I was heading was a really scary one, and sadly, and as we know, the statistics, Aboriginal people, that was the community that I grew up in. Like there were a lot of deaths. There was quite a few young 16-year-old girls that had overdosed on drugs, passed away. Um, I scared myself into going like, oh my God, if I don't change my life, like that is going to be me. And 100% that is exactly where I was going. So
Hmm.
I became a dreamer from a young age, and I just remember I would close my eyes and just imagine and visualize myself doing things that weren't for me. And that might sound a little bit crazy, but there's a few practical things that I will share as well. But I would see myself driving a flash car. I would see myself maybe, just smiling and being happy and maybe going on a holiday, and I remember, and I've always been a dreamer. Every time I embark on anything, I would close my eyes, and there's a beautiful quote, and it's, there's a lot around, the law of attraction and just visualizing. I swear by it. When I, signed up for university, I was working full time, raising my two young kids, and
Mhm.
studying a full-time university degree. Fear will always set in, but I closed my eyes, and whilst the fear was ready to send me walking in the other direction, because fear of failure, fear of judgment, even fear of success, that's all scary when you're someone that's trying to break cycles. But I would close my eyes and dream about the outcome that I wanted. Now that, so I would see myself graduating. I would see the looks on my kids' faces, when I was there. And so that's one thing that I do, and I believe in it. I run workshops with young people, with adults, with anyone around. And what it does, it helps to strengthen our mind, because life will happen. Life will get in the way. It will continue to potentially derail us and give us every excuse to give up. So I
Mhm.
think we can work on our mind. So I will close my eyes and I dream. And to me, that helps me stay focused. I do a lot of journaling, reflection, so and I also do things like create vision boards, like we can do, and I'll do a lot of goal setting. So I think about my short-term goals, my long-term goals, and this is what I did as a teenager. and I continue to do it today. So I've got a Dream Big journal that I've created as well. So I do a lot around on goal setting with old people, with young people. But I break it down into practical steps. So it's one thing to have goals, but I think about, how would I feel when I achieve those goals? What are the strengths and the characteristics of that I admire in people? How will I feel when I get there? Importantly, the strategies, the step-by-step strategies on the little things that I can take, and just actionable steps. So goal setting, believing in myself, and importantly, the last one I'll share is like that positive affirmations. I'm a big supporter of, like, even yesterday, and I was a guest speaker down in Broken Hill yesterday for a big women's event. Last year, I was a finalist for New South Wales Women of the Year Awards. And as much as, like, I think, who am I? Like, I'm nobody. Do you know what I mean? And the fear will get in. Sometimes you feel like, that you don't deserve to be in these spaces, but I have to continuously tell myself. I was at an event yesterday where I was speaking in front of like 150, 170 women. And I get up in the morning, I look at myself in the mirror and I tell myself, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. You do have an important message. And I just have to back myself, because I talk about being champions for each other as well. And sometimes we can have champions. So the best thing that we can do is just be champions for ourselves. And honestly, like I'm doing things that I never thought was possible. I'm speaking at national conferences. I'm doing these things that I often pinch myself going, who the hell do I think I am? But anyway, I'm doing it. But honestly, it takes a lot of work, and it never feels like work when you do what you love. So I'm rolling into these places now with passion and purpose, leading from a place of resilience, knowing that I'm there to make a difference and that I deserve to be in those spaces.
And I
So,
think, oh no, go sorry.
okay, what I'm learning or what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I like to rephrase or paraphrase what I'm listening to. There were reasons why you could have gone on to uh, blame the environment, education, and perhaps the victim of the structure. However, there were few practical things that you did, and now you have that Dream Big journal that can actually act as a tool for not just the children that we have in our environment, but also the educators. When Helen was telling us educators um, from all these sectors that listen to us, I think that parents also listen to us, and some husbands, isn't it, Helen? Helen says. So we when because us educators also could be in vulnerable situations many times. There are challenges that the structure can pose not just to the children but also to the educators, teachers, parents out there. The things that I'm hearing that you did, kind of swimming against the tide, kind of, that's what I heard. And I'm just want to ask for the listeners, this is available on your website for people to access, please.
Absolutely. So on my website, you'll find my books, you'll find the journals. There's two different colors. So that's one copy of the Dream Big journal.
Mhm.
It's full of lots of beautiful art
Yeah,
prompts. So there's two different colors. The other one is the beige one in the background.
got it.
As well as these are things that people can purchase and
Yeah.
cherish and utilize. I always say, like, I really encourage journaling. My books are on there, but I also love to give away free stuff as well. So there's a free
Mhm.
goal setting tool it's a 7-pager you can download for free. There's a free significant, you're always going to find freebies there. So the
Mhm.
website is just kyliecaptain.com.au. So if you're
Yeah.
listening and you want to
I
jump
was gonna I was gonna wait till the end to plug this, but seems we're talking about it. Well, I will also mention that you go and do PD. So you like I know lots of schools get you out, but some early years services, USH services, you go out and talk about
on.
a range of things. What kind of PDs do you do?
Yeah, so I've worked with a lot of like USH services and some early childhood services. So working with the staff to do some things around like cultural capability, just understanding our
Mm.
histories and cultures. We're encouraging them, and it's in their policies, that they need to include this into, the things that they're teaching little ones. But often people have been denied or missed the opportunity to learn it. So just some of those basics, things that they need to learn. And sometimes, you might have learned it at university or at TAFE or whatever, but you can't just learn once and then that's
Mm.
it. You know, you have to, it's great to hear it from, you know, I might share a yarn and share it from my personal perspective, and then you listen to somebody else and it's very different. So I do a lot of education. I
Mm.
do a lot of education around resources, ways to help, you know, create culturally safe spaces. I've also got a
Mm.
membership as well that schools or centres and can sign up to, where I
Mm.
host professional development sessions. So I host 2 a term. I have a big database full of like planning, lesson plans, and lots of different resources that, you know,
Mm.
if you want to become a member, it's called the Excellence in Aboriginal Education Community. So,
Mm.
but a lot of the things as well, I guess what sets me apart from a lot of other people that are doing this work is there's no one size fits all with me.
Mm.
It's like not what I can do for you. It's like, what do your staff need? And
Mm.
I love to create bespoke programs to meet the
Mm.
needs. The last thing that I want to do is just being repetitive. I get really bored and it doesn't feel authentic to me.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I love to have a yarn, and I will tailor it to, you know, because you could be a center that's, you know, it could be someone like you, Helen, that's been on this journey for a long, long time. I don't want to be
Mm.
coming in and telling you what you know, and, you know, how can I further extend
Yeah.
your knowledge and go a bit deeper? And
Mm.
yeah, that's
I will say though, I think cultural competency training is so important. And I think I've done it with my teams, honestly, at least, 5 times. Quite regularly, I do it every time, I either go and work in a new service or, it's been a bit of a while between the last time we didn't. And um, it always amazes me. It amazes me and saddens me. Someone always cries, and like just the shock of a lot of the stuff when they do this training, because we all know that there was such a huge gap in our um, colonial education of what history
Mm.
was, that when you do things like cultural competency training with a professional such as yourself, often staff can get a bit shocked because they had this whitewashed version of history. And I think that's so important, and it's something it's an easy thing we can all do as educators, is to get that baseline training from an Aboriginal person such as yourself. That because when we, I keep saying in this podcast, when we know better, we do better. And, when we have a bit more understanding, we can understand those kids we're caring for. Like, intergenerational trauma seems, at the beginning, when you first start learning about intergenerational trauma, like, as a white person, I suppose you go, oh, hang on a second, this happened years ago, but you're telling me this 3-year-old is, suffering from intergenerational trauma. But I think the more you learn, the
Yeah.
more you understand, and act like it's a kind of a no-brainer once you dive into it. So, like, I just want to impress on any educators listening to us, like, if you've never done cultural competency training, reach out to someone like Kylie, because it's
Hmm.
so important to understand this country's proper history and, the challenges our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have faced, in their own
And
country.
add as well quickly, just sorry, brother, really quickly as well, like absolutely, that's spot on. And there are sometimes tears that come up, and I always say that to do this and to do it well, we have to kind of share from a place of empathy, and
Mm.
mm,
I can come in and share resources and give you a ticker box of things that you could do, but if we don't build the empathy, and we have to sometimes go back and relearn, like I'm an Aboriginal woman that continues to learn, I'll go back and sit and learn as well, just to keep the empathy,
mm,
keep the fire burning. But and sometimes, like, I guess I do lots of truth telling, I do a lot of that stuff as well, and there are tears, and
Mm.
not all, you know, but we don't want to make you feel bad as well. And like one thing, and sometimes people might be quite fearful, going, oh, I don't want to come in because it's going to bring up some of my own trauma, because as we know, the
Mm.
stuff that's happened to Aboriginal people has happened in other cultures around the world as well. So
yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that if you have not been on that journey and you don't feel like you're understanding, it's not your
Mm.
fault. But wherever you go, for example, I just like to make sure I look after people as well.
Mm.
And that you will leave feeling like people are often
Mm.
bouncing out of the room.
Mm.
They're like, okay, I don't have to change the world, but here are some practical things that I can
Yeah.
do
Mm.
to move a little bit, but we have to kind of lead from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I had a question, and but before the question, you said something about how other culture, there are people from belonging to other cultures who might have had certain or similar things happen. And I think empathy is that connection pipeline, the conduit to that. I know what happened in India, and how things are changing, or people are now realizing or becoming aware of certain things. So that point really sits with me when I'm hearing about cultural competency, that the speaker or the facilitator can also appreciate there are different cultures in the room, other than just the Australian culture in the room. And I think that's what I keep bringing back to this podcast, where people coming into Australia, not those who were born in Australia, they might not know any of that, but they might know a little bit about themselves, though. The
Mm.
question I had was, when you have been doing all these amazing work, running professional development to educators from different fields, writing books with your son, with the teachers, and speaking in conferences, what is one of your biggest challenges?
My biggest challenge, and it's just around being continuing to be brave and to be vulnerable and to be courageous. Like that takes a lot of effort.
Hmm.
And it's often, as Aboriginal people as well, we carry a cultural load. We're
Right.
kind of always walking in two worlds, as well as I step into professional spaces and I'm working with a lot of non-Aboriginal people, but I also make sure that I work with my own people as well. So I think it's just continue, and our work doesn't stop. We've got a lot of these you look at our statistics, you look at our overrepresentation in prisons, and our
Hmm.
high suicide rates, and life expectancy and stuff. Like there's a lot that's happened in our communities that continues to weigh us down. So as an educator and a professional, I carry myself into spaces like every other educator, but I carry this heavy load as well of the other stuff that I'm dealing with, which is my own baggage that I carry every single day, but it's also the weight of some of these other things that are happening within my communities as well that really affect me emotionally. So I always have to, I feel like I'm working so hard. So I
Mm.
have to, my biggest challenge is to continue to back myself, to continue to walk in with strength, with courage, and know that and I take good care of myself, but I think, yeah, it is a challenge, because sometimes you just want to have a break, you want to have a rest. But
Mm.
sometimes when you're not seeing, I guess the biggest challenge as well is when we're not seeing the results that we want, quickly enough.
Hmm.
And,
Mm.
I remember talking with one of my uncles recently who's been doing this work for 40, 50 years. He was around to write our first Aboriginal education policies, and he's challenged me, and he's just, well, he said, he reflected and said, Bub, I don't think I'll see the change in my lifetime, and that made
Hmm.
me quite sad, from a
Mm.
man that's been on this journey for so long. And it's made me now want to be, and I know that I can't change the world. I don't have a magic wand, but I feel like I'm in a big hurry. Like, and I know that
Mm.
I don't want to be doing this work forever. Like, there's so many things that I'm passionate about. Like, I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about well-being. I'm passionate about maybe just motivating people to set goals. Like I'd
Mm.
love to not be talking about Aboriginal education and all that sort of stuff anymore.
Mm.
Maybe I want to be a photographer when I grow up, and just
Mm.
that
Hmm.
work. So for me, that's probably, it is a challenge, but at the same time, it's what I'm passionate about, and I love what I do, and I love the impact that I make.
Mm. I think one thing I think Saurabh does it a lot in his professional development. It's a kind of a theme that keeps reoccurring since we started this podcast. You may not be able to change the world, but by you just simply showing up and being positive and seeing the best in a child, which sometimes we know they may be your most challenging child, but if you can just keep working with that child and, getting them to see that you think they're amazing and, they can do great, giving them that confidence that we think you can do great things. As an educator, you might not be able to change the world, but changing, having one child believe in themselves, it actually does change the world because it changes that particular child's whole world. And Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, and even not even just all your other children you care for. I think it's such an important message, and it's why I was so excited to have you on today. Is that teachers and educators um, can literally change the lives of the children they have.
Absolutely. And really quickly as well, I know that I did mention Kathy Burke, who I wrote my second book with, but this week as well. And there are those educators, and you'll always remember that beautiful, like when our educators, when you get flat, go and watch Rita Pearson's,
Yes.
I know that you would have already seen it, at the power of connection. And
Mm.
I actually yesterday, my primary school teacher passed away, and it was her funeral yesterday. And
Oh.
I actually wrote about her in my first book as well, Miss Bosler, and I spoke about my attendance issues and how I always felt like the dumbest kid in the class and how I wasn't good at certain things. But
Mhm.
whenever I went, I bravely walked through those gates at Redfern Public School because
Mm.
of the idea of seeing Miss Bosler. She looked like a princess.
Mm.
She had a deadly red car. She
Mm.
always lit up every time she see me, and I went for that connection, and that's what gave me the courage.
Mhm.
And years later, I reached out to her to find her, and I found her on social media, and she's been battling cancer and battling illness for quite a few years now. And she said that I just brought so much joy into her life, and she was so honored about being mentioned in my book. And I was invited by her family actually to speak at her funeral, but I was away doing some other important work, which I know that she would have wanted me to do.
Mm.
And her goddaughter read out something just yesterday that I wrote, and they shared it at her funeral, and just that the power and the difference that teachers can make. Like I
Mhm.
remember that as a little, 8 and 10-year-old,
Well, thank you, Miss Bosler, for being an amazing teacher. I didn't know her, but I think it's always good to give teachers credit because, like you said, it's been years since you were in primary school, Kylie. No, you're still pretty young, but you're still years since you were in primary school. But for you to still feel so strongly that you wrote about her and you connected and means a lot. And I think,
It,
just all again, repeating myself, impress on educators,
yes.
just see the best.
It also shows how, although we now give words to these things that we do, resilience, mindset, and all of that, but when these things were being created through educator input, we didn't know that we are learning these life skills. So many a times, as Helen had already pointed out, it's not just for the indigenous kids, children, but also for the for non-indigenous children. Why? Because they are the ones who are going to grow up and going to be either inclusive or not inclusive. So
Mm,
we want all of them. Inclusion means include all. So it can't be just one. It has to be the other because the other, if it is not inclusive, no matter how much you are inclusive as an educator, but if you haven't created a population with awareness, if you haven't made them aware, then you are fighting the lone battle. And if I may say it's a battle, and if I may say it's a fight, but I think it's a fight.
mm,
And what I'm also learning, although resilience is something that has shown up in your life, when you were answering your question about one of the challenges that the reason why you have challenges is because you are still passionate. If there was no passion to do something, the challenges would not show up because you have enough reasons and enough reasons why not to do this and just stay home and relax. But because you are passionate, and I think that's what Helen and I stand for too. Because we are passionate, so do challenges show up in our world. If we were not passionate,
mm.
uh, I think yeah, it's challenges are the flip side of passion. So
Beautifully
we are
said. And
conscious of the time, and
Mm.
actually we can because Helen and I can talk for hours till the cows
mm,
come home, and
same, me too.
before this the podcast started, you mentioned that you had some time for us. So I can speak for myself. I, as a learner of this, I have a long way to go. So I am learning, and I think that is me. Learning can be a part of how I can be more inclusive or more aware to be inclusive. Um, but is there something that you want to add to our listeners as one final message that you want to share?
Well, I think just a very sincere gratitude, the fact that they're listening to this episode, they're showing up, I think, and just to continue to be brave, to learn, relearn, unlearn. It's not always through books as well. It's obviously listening to a podcast today. You might want to go and search on Netflix and watch some of those documentaries, like last year, my daughter and I in Reconciliation Week, we watched Rabbit Proof Fence
Mhm.
again. And whilst
Mm.
you might have seen it once, but you watch it again and maybe there's a different message, and for me it had a different meaning and a different level of empathy that it brought up for me. So just to continue to learn, to see what's out in your community, like come along to one of our survival day events on the
Mm.
26th of January to Yarbin or wherever you're located. Celebrate, whether it's NAIDOC week, reconciliation week, just be brave, try and, you know, reach out to Aboriginal people or community organizations within your area. And yes, it is tough, and sometimes you don't hear back, but like Helen said, we continue just to move forward. Don't let it stop you in the little things that we can do, and understand that I think the ripple effect that we're all doing our little part to potentially make our country better. And I think that's it's a big burden that we have on our shoulders, but it's also a beautiful thing to be a part of as well. And also, just lastly, before I wrap up, it's not just all the sad stuff. It's not just about the histories. It's like Aboriginal histories and cultures is fascinating, you know. So learn about the good stuff, you know, the resilience, and like we are the longest living surviving culture in the world for a reason. We are smart, we are deadly. There are many things that you can learn. So, and I'm always open for a yarn, honestly. So if anyone wants to reach out to talk about how I can support, please feel free to reach out through my website. If I can help, then I'm always happy to. And I don't say yes to everything. If I can't help, I'll always hopefully connect you with someone that might be able to as well. But yeah, look, it's been a real honor to come and yarn with you both today. And in the future, if the opportunity comes up, we'll yarn again. Because I think there's more things that we can yarn about, that's for sure.
Thanks to Helen.
Super important just before we let Kylie go, because she's a busy lady. But one thing, oh my goodness, I can't speak English. We've got to the end, didn't have any slip ups. But one thing we as educators and allies can do is support Black-owned business. So Kylie, please remind our listeners, if they want to buy your books, if they want to contact you about PD, just remind us again, how do they contact you?
Thank you. So my business is called Dream Big Education, Wellbeing and Consulting, but my website is simply my name. So Kylie Captain, and it's spelt Captain like Captain Cook. Yes, that's my Aboriginal name for that was my great-grandfather's name. The white fellas couldn't pronounce his name, and he was a tracker. So it's kyliecaptain.com.au. That's a yarn for another day. And yeah, on there you'll find books, resources, contact forms, courses, joining my community, lots of different things. So thank you both for having me. Helen, it's so lovely to see you again, and we'll definitely catch up for a cuppa, because I think there's definitely a lot to yarn about.
Thank you, Helen, for organizing this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, we will see you next time. And thank you for joining us.
Look after yourself and the people you love. From We Belong Education, it's a podcast. It's a goodbye.
Thank you.
See you later.